Do you have any questions? Before we... Avery, could you maybe sit a little that way so we make sure I have access to everyone? Just a little, thank you. Anyone with any questions or comments? Yeah, Carmen. Well, are you a Christian? Buddhist? You don't believe in anything. You're lost and confused. I'm just kidding. So, there is this verse in one of the Gospels, I'm not quite sure which one, that knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Have you heard that? It's really not a very good saying, but nevertheless. Have you ever dated? You have? Sorry to hear that. From Oakland? Outside of Oakland? Better luck there, good. So, what usually happens in dating is the following. And this is just a guess, which I think is... Hello? Who are you? Oh. The only reason I ask for your name is because the next couple of days I have to draw people, and I don't want to drop you accidentally. Alexandra, what's your last name? Okay, all right. So what happens when, for those of you who came in late, Carmen's question had to do with, what's a good question? Or no? Sure, yeah. So what's a good question? When you're young, you lack experience, and you haven't really been touched or broken by life. What usually happens is you go to a party, hello, and you see someone out there and they look good, they smell good. You talk to them, spend some time with them, and whenever you spend a good amount of time with anyone, emotions are created. Then after a few weeks, you look at them and say, I like you. And then if you're really, really unlucky and unfortunate and you're waiting for tragedy to come into your life, you spend some more time with this person and then you say, I love you. And from that point on, your life just goes downhill. Begins to smell really bad. And then, God forbid, if you're pregnant, if you're married, then it gets even worse. Then, of course, the guy leaves you. Or you leave the guy, whatever the case may be. That's if you're hetero. And so you go through some anger, you go through some depression, then you begin to ask a lot of whys. How could I have been so stupid to have gone out with Joe from Oakland? Or Jack from Richmond? Or Jim from Oakland? Or Joe from Richmond? Okay. And then you realize that you're simmering in pain. You know what simmering is, right? You're slowly being cooked. And when you're slowly being cooked, you have no choice but to think a little. And this is a very different way of thinking. It's not like, should I call him now or should I call him 10 minutes from now? It's a bit more deeper. It's seasoned with a good amount of pain, reflection. And you're no longer 18, so you're not as stupid. You're 20, maybe 25, maybe 30. As you age, hopefully you become less and less stupid, which means you do less things that are idiotic, that will cause you to regret, remorse, all that. Then, and also when you go out on dates with like 18, 19, 20-year-olds, you ask, so what do you do? Like, Who are your friends? Like, you want to go smoke or you want to go watch a movie? You know, silly questions like that. Important, because all of us have to engage in this dance. And then slowly you become comfortable and you realize the masks are now off and you just don't like the person sitting next to you or laying next to you. You get to be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, you realize you don't want to be alone anymore. You're tired, you're lonely, you're depressed, so you go out on dates. And you're a healthy, like a 40, 50-year-old. So you say to them, they're sitting next to you, are your parents? Because you've come to realize that ultimately fruits don't turn out very different from the tree from which they fell. So for example, if your parents are divorced, there's a good chance that your relationships are going to fall apart. If you like to do drugs, there's a good chance that you like to hang out with people who are addicted. If you enjoy watching porn, well, that's what you do. You want to find someone with whom you can sit and watch porn. Okay? So when you get to be 40, you realize, well, you've been damaged enough. Mostly you've done this to yourself. Now you say, you know what, I'm going to ask some really, really interesting questions now. Do you have a job? Do you have money? Do you have a car that runs well? Are you good with your parents? You're looking for foundation. Someone whose foundation is not cracked as much. So what usually happens when you're young, you ask questions that are superficial, important. What else can you do? When you get to be a little older, you ask a bit more important questions. Why? Because you're much more aware of time, you're much aware of your own patience, your own capacity. So as you age and you gain more experience, the nature of your question begins to change. Does that, Arvi? So when you go out on a date, let's say this weekend, what are you going to ask? What's a superficial question? Yes. Yes. That's a great question. And let's say you're dating me and I say, yes, I have 5 pets. What's the next question?
What are your pets?
No, that's a bad question. Now, your first question, how many pets you got? It's a good question when I tell you 5. When you got 5 pets, you don't have time to hang out with people. You got to take them on a walk all the time. You're mostly concerned about, should I buy cat food, dog food from Costco, 7-Eleven, right? So my interaction with people are not going to be as much. That should tell you something about me. I don't hang out with people. I don't probably have social etiquette. I'm quite lonely, sad, desperate. Maybe it's my foundation, my background. Maybe someone hurt me. Do you really want to spend time with me? No, your question is not what are your pets' name, but why do you got so many pets? What's wrong with you? Now that's a good question, but you won't ask it until you're about 50. Good luck. Ilya? I'm sorry?
I said I was going to ask why you got 5 pets.
No, I just told you. Anyone else?
Love them all equally.
Say again?
Love them all equally.
Do you love them all equally? Oh, no. It doesn't work that way.
You have a favorite and a least favorite.
Oh, we're all biased.
Like when your friend said you all love you equally, it's a lie.
It certainly is. You got kids?
No.
Thank God. Now, when you do have kids, you'll understand something really, really awful and interesting. For some strange reason, you always love your firstborn just a bit more. Why? Because, well, it's your firstborn. You spend 110% of your time with them. You hang out with them. You have dreams and hopes with them. You haven't yet been broken by frustration, anxiety, depression, all that stuff. You know? By the time you have your second one, you do so first because you don't want your first one to go alone in life. You want to give him a brother or a sister. It's a life partner, right? It's also like a toy. Jimmy, hello. So the second one, you have them, not because, it's mostly planned. The first one is usually an accident. Or the couple is just bored, they look at each other and say, oh, I think we're ready for a family. And then, of course, comes out us. The first one. Yeah, I got a lot of them.
How many?
A lot of them, a dozen.
How many is a dozen?
Huh? Accidents?
How many is a dozen?
12.
12. Like eggs.
Big percentage. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. They're no good.
How many siblings do you have?
3.
The first.
I am the oldest. I got the most attention from my parents. I'm spoiled. Anyone else? Talia?
How did you feel like raising up?
Getting most of the attention? Well, when you're young, you don't really notice that. But it is something that comes with human nature. I mean, imagine if your hand was raised, and for whatever the reasons are or were, I would just look that way. You want attention. And when I look at you and I see your hand going up, I'll call your name. And then you ask your question. What if that went unnoticed? What would happen to your self-confidence? You begin to look at yourself. Do I look bad? Am I ugly? Do I smell bad? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with him? And if that happened quite a bit, you'd probably get depressed, be on Prozac. Or maybe just do a lot of drugs. Good for you. Anyone else? Q? Why? They're too old for you. Anyone else?
I think if I'm a second born, I know how it feels. Didn't do drugs, mind you. I found philosophy, thankfully.
Sorry to hear that.
Found philosophy, so much better. To live is to suffer, to survive.
Allahu
is to
Akbar.
find meaning.
We'll talk about living and suffering maybe near the end of the semester, but for now, let's just ask some. Anyone else who hasn't asked questions yet before we go to.
Are you a favorite?
In what? In the eyes of God? No, are you kidding? My parents hate me. Anyone else? Alexandra, I'll come back to you. Avery,
What's the difference between something that's ethical and something that's moral?
well, let me give you an example.
Of what? Moral or ethical?
Well, let me just give you an example. The Inuits, these are the Eskimos, however many that are left. The environment is relatively cold. They don't have Costco's or Safeway. They're what we call nomadic people. They move around quite a bit. If, for example, someone lived in Oakland and they were moving around a bit, you would look at them as unstable. Because Oakland is supposedly supposed to be a civilized space. You have housing, you have Safeways, find yourself a job, rent an apartment, and that can be your space. Okay? And that particular space will protect your flesh against heat, against freeze, right? You will invite friends, and that is what you can call your home. And every so often you will continue to renew the lease until you grow an attachment to the walls, to the sofas, to the chairs, all those things, okay? And so just in case there are moments where you say to yourself, I want to leave Oakland, and let's just say I want to go to Sacramento because it's a cleaner place, better place. Something about you, now you may not notice this, but something about you, despite seeing all the violence, all the dirtiness, all the awful things that Oakland may have, you may realize there are parts of you that are profoundly attached to Oakland. And you want to walk away, but something about you says, no, it's okay. Just stick around in a couple more years, and then maybe you want to leave. Okay? And those 2 years will never come. And all of a sudden you realize, well, you came to Oakland at the age of 17, and now you're 917. Okay? Now, so someone who is a nomad in a city life, in a city setting, there is something off about them, something tragic about them. Eskimos were different because it's basically a frozen space, what they need to do is move around quite often. The moment the climate becomes really difficult to survive, it's just difficult for your flesh. The moment food is short and you can't feed your family, add to it the fact that mothers have to nurse their kids. Not like here, only 2 years or maybe 3 years, sometimes for 6 or 7 years. So if you have like a 1-year-old, a 2-year or a 3-year-old, a mother can only has so much milk to go around. Okay? So as they're moving, a mother has to make a choice. The parents are old, they can hardly walk, so they say, you know what, I'm just going to leave my parents in the snow to die. They don't know Jesus Christ. And once the parents are left in the snow and they freeze to death, there is no shame, there is no guilt, there is no remorse. No one needs to go to church and ask God for forgiveness. That's their morality.
Their time.
Okay? If you have a child and it happens to be one, and you realize, well, you have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they need to be fed first. By the time you get to the 1-year-old, you got no milk inside you. So what you do? You put your 1-year-old in the snow to die. Now, one of the things that you need to understand about morality and ethics is that anyone who has any power in life, imagine you're going out on a date, or let's say you have a boyfriend, and I'm just going to black and white most of these relationships, okay? Heterosexual relationships. Let's say you have a boyfriend and he happens to be like 25 and he doesn't like to do drugs, but you do. He's going to come down really hard on you. If you want to stay with me, if you want this relationship to survive, no drugs. Now, you can say, well, honey, can you not impose your perspective on me? Says, yeah, leave. So the dominant culture or the dominant person usually has a tendency of imposing their rights and wrongs on you. I don't care about your life. If you don't do the assignments, I will give you an F. Now, you may want to come to my office and say, Amir, listen, my mom was sick, then my dog died, and then A happened and B happened. And what you're trying to do is you want to soften me. Okay? Now, if I happen to have empathy, a little compassion, I'll say, okay, Avery, listen, why don't you make up all the missed assignments? And then you're going to go home and talk to your parents and say, you know, I have this instructor, he's so moral, he's so good. If on the other hand, I was a bit more rigid, you would say he's an ass. And that's what morality and ethics are all about. Now, it goes a bit more deeper in the sense that if you happen to know history, especially Western history, especially the sort of history where Christians would take their Christian doctrines to Asia, to Africa, make other people feel bad for the sort of gods they believed in, the rituals they observed, and replace those philosophies of life with Christianity. Now what you have is one group of people looking at an entire world saying, whoever is not Christian is immoral, unethical. That not only are they flawed inwardly, but whenever they act outwardly, it's also flawed. So morality is something that's inward. Ethics is something as an abstract, as a concept, outward.
Like a social thing?
Well, when you talk about social things, you have to understand the first question that you need to ask is, what does it mean to be a human being? And we'll save that for like 10, 15 years from now. Anyone else before we... Jamie, Zoni.
Just hitting on that last subject, and the doctrine of discovery of the church, Catholic Church, setting out that ultimatum, sending people out. Right on Christianity, they don't acquiesce that you have the right to unalive them.
Not by the book, by the blade.
Supplicate them, whatever.
But look, it really doesn't really much have to do with a certain philosophy of life being right or wrong. It just has to do with who has the most amount of power. Consider this class. Some of you in this class may have wonderful things to say. If I don't like the way you look, if I don't like the tone of your voice, if I think that what you have to say is irrelevant, you can have your hand up 24/7. I'm not going to call on you. And if I do, you'll have about 10 seconds, and then I'll have to shut you down. Anyone else? Remember what I said. This is your class. Come to class with your own questions. I don't prep for my classes. They're useless. Prepping, I mean. Yeah, Connor.
My question is that, what is it to be good? What is it to be good?
I don't know. Sometimes it's good to stay married because of your kids. Sometimes it's best to divorce because of your kids. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on the relationship. It depends on the abuse. It depends on capacity, on culture, on religion, on temperament, lots of different things. But we'll talk about good and bad in a few weeks. Yeah.
You feel like we live in a selfish society?
I'm sorry?
A selfish society?
Well, forget society for now. If you were to just focus on selfishness for a moment. Do you have children?
No.
Thank God. Don't ever have kids, at least not anytime soon. I mean, eventually you have to, but not anytime soon.
I work at a
Fine. Eventually you'll have kids, but just not anytime soon. So imagine that you're pregnant. God forbid, but just imagine it. Okay. Now, initially it's going to be fun. You like your man, you know, he's good to you, you're good to him. And maybe you've read a couple of passages from Arthur Schopenhauer, the cranky philosopher, who said that women are really good at one thing, baiting men, so they could get pregnant and have children. But all that aside, you guys are really good. You wake up one morning, you feel a little funny, you take a test, and you run to your boyfriend, or you call him, and you say, you're going to be a dad. And he's extremely happy, okay? And then you go to various places, you buy beds and cribs and strollers and this and that, lots of diapers from Costco. That's the best place to go, okay? Formula, Costco. Not Target, not 7-Eleven, Costco. Okay? You gotta be smart about money. And comes about like third or fourth month where you're nauseous all the time and you're irritable. Your companion looks at you and says, what are you looking at me for? Oh, okay. And you can't sleep. You can't cook because every time you cook anything, you want to throw up. And all of a sudden, a story that used to be so wonderful, so beautiful, is beginning to annoy you a little. You don't even know. It's biological for the most part. And then you're like 8 months and 28 days. Let's just say. You're overdue. And it's awful. You can't sleep. You can't rest. Nothing. You're always exhausted. Everything looks bad, smells bad, feels bad. But then you are rushed to Kaiser. And then someone sits on you and the baby pops out. You say, thank God I can rest a little. But you hear this crying. The baby doesn't care that it put you in this miserable situation for about 6 months. You need to nurse him. You need to hold them. And then you look at your husband and the nurse say, can you just put him on that bed over there? I just want to close my eyes for 10 minutes. But you can't. And you realize something really interesting. From the moment this kid comes out of you, they act profoundly selfishly. They don't care about the misery they put you through. They don't really care how tired you are. They don't care about your hopes, your dreams, your fantasies. They only care about what they want, which is hold me, nurse me. And that selfishness is actually good for them. They need bonding time. Their flesh needs to be on top of your flesh. They need to smell you. Make sure that you're not a counterfeit. It's a selfishness that protects them. Let's say you hate doing drugs, and Q, as your boyfriend, loves doing drugs. Hello, Abby. Now, how are you going to be a healthy selfish? No drugs. What's an unhealthy selfish? I want a boyfriend who does drugs with me every day of the week. So there is good selfishness and there is bad selfishness. If there is unhealthy selfishness, what usually happens is when time passes, you come to realize some of the errors, and then you'll have regret. And then you begin to self-blame. How could I have been so stupid? How old are you? 22. So you graduate from high school at the age of 18. You put yourself to college, you're done with college at the age of 20. You go to a 4-year school, 22, you're done with your bachelor's. I have no doubt most of us in this class who have some age in us, once in a while, we are pushed into examining some of our own life stories. And you have no choice but to be a little sad. Missed opportunities. Why? You were selfish, yes, but in all the wrong ways. Anyone else before we... Howard? Can you...
It's like, how do you know C you do by yourself or somebody force you?
Sure. Are you a Buddhist? It's really not a very good tradition. It's like worse than Christianity. But we'll leave it aside for now. One of the things that supposedly this man said some 3,000 years ago, Siddhartha, who ultimately became the Buddha, was, we are dependent on things. It means that if you're hungry and you see in my hand a sandwich, you have a couple of options. If you're bigger, like Mike Tyson, and stronger, you can either come and say, give me your sandwich. I say, no, you'll beat me up, take my sandwich and go away. That's one way to do it. Or you'll say, Amir, I haven't eaten for a while. You'll try to arouse some emotions of empathy about me, and I'll give you half of my sandwich. You need me to survive. You need air to survive. You need safe way to exist to survive. In other words, you are dependent. You need other things. Are you single? One of these days you're going to find yourself a companion, not because you love, but because it sucks to be lonely. And that loneliness becomes a driving force. And eventually that loneliness will create this mask that, yes, you're not lonely, you're in fact in love. All of us are forced to be moving around by the forces on the outside. Why are you in school? Why are you taking this class? Why do you call your parents every other day? There is no autonomy. In other words, you are not an individual. You don't make decisions because you want to. Everything is conditional. But if you're really smart, this is what you'll do. You can hang out with Q. He's a nice looking man. No, Howard, look at him. Nice hair, looks friendly. Huh? He can creatively say to you, hey, Howard, let's go near the estuary. It's that pool of water in the back of Laney College where the ducks make out. You should go out there. They go quack, quack, and then quack, quack really loudly. They're making out. And then the two of you can sit they can smoke. Or, as you're about to go smoking with your newfound buddy, Q Love, I accidentally run into you. I say, Howard, where are you going? I'm going with Q Love. Ooh. Where are you guys gonna go? Where the ducks make out. Ooh. You know, if you have class, you're gonna miss today's class, there's going to be a quiz. What's gonna happen? You're gonna think about your future. Failing this class means staying in Oakland another semester. You don't wanna do that, especially in any college. So you see me, you think that honesty is the best policy. If you want to go smoking, you should have lied. I have a stomach flu. I'm sick. I'm dying. I can't make it to class. That would buy you some time. But no, you're stupid enough to be honest. I'm going to go smoke with Q Love. And then I'll impose my will. I'm going to fail you. You're going to be another semester. Which one are you going to choose? That depends on how selfish you are. If you choose selfishness that revolves around me, it means that you're thinking about your future. You don't want to fail this class. You want to leave Oakland. You want to go to four-year school. You want to make your parents proud. If, on the other hand, you follow him, that's also being selfish, but it also means you don't really care about what your parents think about you. You don't care about your future, all that. The point I'm trying to make, Howard, is make sure that you are under the influence of the right people. If not people, right forces. Next time you want to watch porn, make sure right next to your laptop there is a Bible. Now you have to do two forces. There is the Bible, Jesus Christ died for your sin. Don't be an idiot. And there is a computer. One will eventually win. You can't do porn and read the Bible at the same time. It won't work. You know who told me that? Stormy Daniels. Yes.
Is ethics driven by religion?
So there are a couple of things. First, we need to examine what religion is, how it evolved. Then we need to talk about living in small towns and villages, and then how after the 18th century, those small towns and villages were kind of deleted and were replaced with big cities. And then you have to ask yourself what happens when a small village turns into a big city. There is a place above Sacramento, it's called Georgetown. The last time I visited Georgetown, population was about 300. One Chinese restaurant, one coffee shop, one mechanic shop. This was about 15, 20 years, maybe even longer. That's where David Long used to live. There was only one school, K through 12. That's it. And everybody knew everybody. I kid you not. That's where one of my former professors used to live, and I used to go there and we used to hang out once in a while. You walk from point A to point B, you know everyone. Okay. And then you come to Oakland. Population a few million. Everybody's a stranger. The ethics, the morality, the human behavior in Georgetown is very, very different. Social etiquette is very, very different. Okay. But to give you a very, very simple and brief answer, for the longest time, yes. Ethics and morality revolved around various concepts of religion. As the culture became more secularized, and by that I mean the following, for those of you who may not know. The more the culture became meaty, the less religious it was.
Like bigger? Or more diverse?
No, I mean the following. I had a student some years ago, very, very nice young man. He was at Laney for a number of years, and he went to San Francisco. I'm not quite sure what exactly he studied, but one day he comes to my office, and he starts crying. And I say, Joe, what's going on? I've met this young woman. I really like her, but I've been addicted to porn for the past 6 years. I want to have a healthy relationship with her, but I can't. All I see is a piece of meat that I want to have and then toss away. That's what I mean by meat, meaty. When societies grow really, really big, and when your time is squeezed, in other words, you work 9 to 5, then you take classes, then out of exhaustion you go home, microwave your dinner, watch a quick TV, and then pass out in your bed. You don't have time to socialize. You don't have time to gossip. And one of the nice things about socialization and gossip is that if you were to come to this class every single day, and then if you were to come to my office every day, you and I would begin to have a relationship, a platonic one, but a relationship nevertheless. Why? It revolves around time spent. But when you don't have the luxury of time to invest and spend on things, well, you can't have a relationship. I'm not just looking at you, I'm looking at her, I'm looking at her, I'm looking at her, I'm looking at him, and all these people are equally attractive. I want to give you 5 minutes, give him 10 minutes, then give him 15 minutes. And I spread myself out. And the more I spread myself out, the less I can be focused on one single human being. And because my time is squeezed, I have no choice but to look at people as tools. What can I get from him? Or what can I get from her? Add to it the fact that now you're living in a big city where people are pushed to be alone. That aloneness causes loneliness. It's good to be alone if you're sitting somewhere in your room and writing for 10 hours. That's a good aloneness to be. But the aloneness that kind of ultimately becomes poison to your psyche, where you say, man, I'm so lonely. Why can't I go out there and make friendships? Then you get depressed. Okay? So I forget your question, but just play with all that. Denasia.
Do you think that mythology, religion, and ethics kind of go hand in hand? Because we look at Egyptian gods and mythology, those gods are gods of and basically definitions of ethics, how people should act, and the rulers should go by and stuff like that. And it all ties into religion because there are people who worship those gods, gods,
So Egypt has 3 kingdoms. The old, the middle, and the new. Now, have you ever been to Egypt? Have you seen pictures of Egypt? Okay, well, you've probably seen the wrong pictures. But Egypt is right in the middle of the desert, at least used to be, okay? And it would be very, very difficult to get to Egypt way back then, it was very difficult to domesticate animals. We hadn't yet created wheels, so you couldn't have chariots, so you had to walk. Or maybe you had domesticated a couple of horses or donkeys and you would walk them to Egypt. But by the time you get to Egypt, halfway through, your horses would be dead because it's hot, there's no water, no oasis of sorts. So Egypt remained isolated for many, 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 many centuries. Now, one of the nice things about being isolated was that they were not conquered. No nation would be able to cross the desert to go to their property, kill some people, occupy, and then settle. It wouldn't work. And so their religion did not have a hell, did not have a punishment of sorts. You die, you just serve the Pharaoh. Okay? But something really interesting happened. After some years when you have enough horses, now you have invented the wheel, now you have invented chariots, now you cross the desert, and now you enter Egypt. Now you massacre a good amount of people. You take over their property. You rule over them. Eventually, people will revolt. You can be nice to me as I invade your inner space and I call you all sorts of names. Every time your hand goes up, I say, put your hand down. You're stupid, you're this, you're that. You can only take that for so long before you revolt. You fight back. And that's what Egyptians did. They fought back. And they drove out They're occupiers. But something really interesting happened to the religious tradition. Now they had a God who would take out your heart, put it on the scale, and put the feather on the scale next to it. Now you have hell. Now you have Hades. Now you have punishments of sorts. And you should ask yourself now, do we create hell and heaven? Do we create ethics because we are hurt? See, if you've never had a boyfriend, you've only read novels about love, you have these fantasies in your head. Oh, I'm sorry that in the novel Jack broke up with Jill. Everything is just in the books. You're having fun. Now you can have debates with your friends, you can talk about love and this and that, but it's not really experience. Your own experience. It's not embodied. And then what happens is that you walk into your relationship with trust. That's what all the novels say. Men are good, women are good. Don't forget, don't worry about their past. Just see who they are for what they are. So you walk in very innocently. And let's just say, if you were to spice this up a little bit, you're a Christian. Thou shalt not judge unless you want to be judged, you know. And then you realize that you're going out with a scumbag after a few weeks. But you're in love. Now something about you has become contaminated. For the first time, you've understood life. You've understood men. You've understood the complexities of relationship. Now ethics comes about. Now morality comes about. Now hatred comes about. All of a sudden you, who observed and practiced, thou shalt not judge for the first 15 years of your life, now you begin to judge your boyfriend, his parents, his friends. Anyone else? Jamie? Ivan?
Death.
I'm sorry?
About death. Doesn't it make everything equal in the end? Does it not?
If I was to die and you were to die at the same time, or maybe a couple of years later, yes, that would make us both equal. But death has other functions. Let me give you an example. Can I? I'll give you two examples. One comes from this wonderful Indian text called Katha Upanishad, Dialogue with Death. But we won't talk about that just yet. Do you like me, Connor?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, how much do you like me from 1 to 10?
Let's say 6.
Can you go up a bit? My feelings are hurt. I'm waiting. All right, 6 is good. So what is 6? Like, so 1 is I don't care, 2 is
you at 1.
You hate me at 1. What's 6?
Above positive, above neutral.
So is it like,
Yeah.
but not infatuation?
No, definitely not.
Obsession?
No.
Love? You sure?
I respect you.
That's no good. Now, Connor, please. You're upsetting me. Let's say that you and I are friends, like good friends. Like a 10. I know it doesn't seem possible, but you never know, you know. Magic happens in life. Alexander, how's your phone? So, now, let's say it's the first day of this class, you and I don't know each other. And as I'm taking roll, all of a sudden, you see a facial expression. It makes you a little concerned. Then I fall to the ground and die. And then very quickly you take out the class schedule and you say, is there anyone who's teaching ethics? That's like a number one. Okay? I'm dead right in front of you, but you look at the class schedule. You act like a true American. But let's say it's the end of the semester. You've come to this class on a regular basis. You've done all the assignments. You email me all the time. You come to the office all the time with 3-pound bags of coffee. Right? You and I are very, very, very good friends. Now you respect me. Not because I'm just a human being. You respect me because...
I value your opinion.
No! I mean, yes. But you feel as if you're learning things. But with that respect, there is also tiny elements of love. Love first. Yes. And then you also fear me, just in case I don't approve of some of the things you say or do. Okay? And when you go to your own parties with your friends, you talk about some of the things you've talked about in this class. Right? Who lives inside you, Connor? I do. Who lives inside your psyche? Your heart? And just in case you have a companion, let's just say a woman, and you guys are having a good time, who are you thinking about? There you go. Now let's say you come to this class, business as usual, and as I'm talking, all of a sudden I fall and I die. What's the difference between the first scenario and the second scenario? Let me answer it. By the way, I forgot to mention something when we were doing the syllabus. Don't make comments. The only thing that you ought to do in this class is raise your hand and ask questions. That's all. And if seemingly I'm asking you a question, don't answer. I'll answer it for you, if that's okay. Thank you. Jamie? The first scenario, you and I had spent no time with one another. You respected me, first because I have authority, I have power. I'm your instructor, supposedly. I have your future in my hand. And you were trained, raised the right way by your parents. Respect your elders, especially instructors. Okay, fine. The second scenario, we've spent countless amount of time. I've grown on you as you've grown on me. Love, you're right, it creates attachment. But this particular love, this particular attachment has made you passive. You lay and you lay open, and I'm active. I give and you receive. Now, it doesn't mean that you understand what you receive, it just means that you receive. Okay? Now, by the time you get to the station of love, what happens is that everything about your life revolves around me. What classes does he teach? What would he do? You know those bands that people wear sometimes? What would Jesus do? You wouldn't wear that particular wristband. On yours, it would say, what would Amir do? That's what happens when you fall in love. Okay. Now, when I fall in love, when I die right in front of you, something interesting is going to happen. First, it's going to come to you as a shock. And it's not going to come to you as a pleasant shock. It's not like you have won the lotto. Okay? I made your life rich. My absence now plunges you into poverty. You're poor. And what happens when you're poor? When you're poor, you become homeless. Not just physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Okay? You feel stranded in the middle of nowhere. You're going to be confused. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to ask a lot of whys. Then, if you happen to be at a certain stage in your life, first, my death will cause you to be external. You will look at me and you will ask why. You will look at your life and you ask why. But if you were to be a bit more mature, a bit more seasoned, and you're there because of life, yeah, it's okay, sure. You say to yourself, how are people born? Why do they die? If my death can come at any moment, how should I live? And now that becomes a very ethical question. How should I live? Not according to Amir Sabzavar or Jesus Christ. How should I live? Death makes you reflect, and it won't be a happy place to be. But we'll talk about death later. Anything? Anyone? Yeah.
How are we meant to have in class discussions with you? About people feedback or comments?
Well, you're just supposed to have questions.
No statements, just questions.
Yeah, you want to make statements. You have Facebook page? Twitter? TikTok? You have friends. You can use this class as a form of gossip for your friends. No good? Why? If you were to be given the space to make a comment or a statement, what would it be?
I know that I'd like to hear people talk more.
Why? You're not friends with them.
So,
What do you care? You want to talk to them? See them after class. Anyone else?
because then it sounds like
It's okay, I don't mind.
The dialectic is working.
Yeah, but I'm not Socrates. Jamie,
reflection and
so let's use our good friend here as an example. And it's not about you, trust me, because these questions come up all the time. Why can't we have more class discussions and all that? Before you can actually move into the stage of reflection, for the most part and for the longest time in your life, you just react. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm your father, and ever since you were born, I whispered in your ears passages from the Gospels. And then I take you to church, and then you're baptized, and then we go there every Sunday, hand in hand together. And then you walk into class, someone asks you, "Are you religious?" You say, "Yes." "What is it?" "I'm a Christian." Okay? And then you take this class. Now, I'm not your father, I'm your instructor. Now remember, what is your background? About 35 years of Christianity. And you assume, and all of us do, that you're able to think and reflect and assume about things all in the right way. You come to this class and I say, "Jamie, have you ever read the Gospel of Judas?" "No. Judas is evil. Yuck." "Well, can I tell you a few things? The Gospel of Judas is fake." "What are you doing?" "Well, you're not really thinking. You're not even hearing me. You're not even giving yourself the opportunity to sit back, relax, sit back for a moment and ask, well, how did the four Gospels come about? Could there actually be a Gospel of Judas or a Gospel of Mary or a Gospel of Nicodemus?" No, you don't do any of that. You react according to your conditioning. Your father took you to church. You are nothing but your father's Gospels and a set of assumptions. And the moment you hear the word Judas, the Gospel of Judas, and the gospel means good news. What sort of a good news can Judas actually give us? Then you react. Now, that's not thinking or reflecting. And it could be that the moment I say Judas, he can have his hand up, and she can have his hand up, and he can have his hand up, and we have a lively class discussion. But it's really just a bunch of 18-year-olds with no real information or experience, just yapping on. And I, as a 60-year-old man who has more time behind me than ahead of me, I have to sit back and somehow, patiently, survive the ramblings of ridiculous people. Now, let's say, on the other hand, that it is true that your father has only exposed you to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but he also did something really interesting. He exposed you to different religions, different philosophies of life. In addition, some funny gospels out there. Now you come to this class for the first time, I say, the Gospel of Judas. You don't react, but you become curious. Judas? Why did my father tell me those things? And then you go to the library. Then you actually check out the book. You read a few passages. Now you begin to think. You begin to think about what the gospel is saying. And if you take those moments of thinking seriously, then you begin to reflect. As you're walking from the library home, you say, okay, what does that mean? How does it apply to my life? Now, if you want to reflect, the first rule for reflection is get rid of your emotions. Because if you're reacting, you're just filled with emotions. You haven't really studied what you're talking about. You haven't examined. Reflection means detachment. You stand outside. You look at something. And that's a really, really difficult thing to do. And plus, it's an art. Unlike any art, it takes time to become proficient. I had a friend who used to come to the car wash quite often. You're very young, very attractive, Persian. She was engaged to be married, but her husband drowned, or her husband-to-be drowned back home. And she used her attractiveness as a source of power, attention from people, and that attention would make you feel relevant and all those things. I think she must have gone out with maybe 100 men. I don't know if she slept with all of them, but she was a serious dater. And she would always blame the men for the relationships not working. And I remember the last time I saw her, it was at Costco in Roseville. And by this time, she was probably 50. She's still single. But she said something very interesting. She says, I remember all those times I came to the car wash and I blamed other people for the way that I was. For the first time I realized, just a couple of weeks ago, that I am to be blamed. But it took about 30 years for her to come to this understanding, reflection. And reflection is always caused by you being forced to pause, to examine, to feel some pain, discomfort. The rest of your question I've forgotten, sorry. Q? Anyone else before we go home? What time is it? Oh, we're done at 10:15, right? Or 10:45? 10:45, okay. So we have like another 2 hours. Howard?
Why is it?
Why is the what?
Fire. Fire.
Fire?
Yeah, most important, almost all religions.
Fire? Well, can I change your question? Yeah, I don't like that question, so let me just change it. You have four very, very powerful elements inside you. Well, one, potential. It's there, but it could potentially come to exist. And I borrow this from Chinese philosophy. So you have water, you have fire, you have air, and then you have earth. Your body symbolizes earth. Fire, on the other hand, symbolizes passions, desires. Where do desires come from? Why do you pursue them? How do you pursue them? How do desires and society mesh? Do you like korma sabzi? What? You've never had korma sabzi? Are you sure? Now, korma sabzi is a Persian dish. If you haven't heard it, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't smelled it, if you haven't tasted it, you probably can't imagine it. And if you can't imagine it, you probably don't desire it. It's not there. You only desire the things that you've been exposed to. Now, sometimes desires don't have to be positive, they can be negative. Kind of like what our good friend Alexandra said the first day of this class. She looks at me. I remind her of someone. That someone she doesn't like very much. But some of my attitude, personality, the way I speak, reminds her of that someone. She knows what to do in this class. She's not here to learn. She needs the grade. She won't listen. She's already made up her mind. Why? By something she was exposed to some years ago. And I'm easily categorized. She's already made her ethical and moral decisions as to who and what I am. And whether or not I can teach her a couple of things. It's finished. It's not very difficult. Anyone else? Can you think of a fake one?
Is it at all possible to have reflection of things? Like, could you just learn it from seeing something else? Have painful experience?
There is a really, really good book in the Old Testament, and you don't have to be religious. When I talk about the Gospels or the Old Testament or religion, you really don't have to be religious to be interested in ideas. This wonderful book, which happens to be the oldest book of the Old Testament, older than Genesis and all the other books combined or contained in that book, is the book of Job. One of the things that happens in that book is Job is a very unreflective man at the beginning of the book. He has his own values of right and wrong. His kids die. He says, well, you know, God gives and God takes. His animals die. God gives and God takes. Even his wife comes to him and says, what's wrong with you? Don't be so ridiculous. Why is this happening? Think a little. And the only thing he says, we are not in the mind of God. Keep your mouth shut. And then something really interesting happens to Job. He himself gets sick. He's touched by pain. And now he begins to scream. And the next few pages of that book, he screams left and right. He wants to know why. He demands justice. He puts God, on the cross and tries him. So what usually happens if I was to tell you, what was your name? Quinn. Let's say that I tell you the first thing I do that when I come to this class is, Quinn, I was not feeling too well. I went to Kaiser on Saturday and emergency, and they ran some tests and they told me this news. I have cancer stage 4. How's that going to make you feel?
Sad.
Sad for me, of course. Why? Of course, I know what you're going to say, because long time ago you saw this movie with Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer called Frankie and I, where he is released from prison. He starts working at this coffee shop. The second day, this waitress dies, and he goes to her funeral. And when Michelle Pfeiffer, the other waitress, asks him why, he says to her, every human being, when they go to bed, they put their hopes and dreams under the pillow. And when they wake up, they want to take those dreams and hopes out and turn them into reality. For her, it didn't happen. Yes, you look at me and you feel sad. Sad for me, sad for my hopes and dreams, sad for my wife, sad for my kids, sad for my parents, my dad who's 90, how is he going to endure this? My mom who's 80, how is she going to endure this? Right? And then after a while, you go home and you call your mom and you say, oh, Mom, yeah, my instructor, he's got cancer 4. He says he's got 2 hours to live. He's probably dead by now. And your mom says, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Well, what's going to happen to the class? You need ethics as a requirement to graduate. She says, oh, Mom, on top of that, don't worry. I'm old news now. Yeah, my news caused you some pain. You're sad now. But what if you got cancer? I've lived my life. I'm 60. I've heard all the questions that usually students ask. I've been there, I've done that. You, on the other hand, you're 20. You got lots of things waiting for you, at least you think. What are you going to do when you hear that news? It's no longer a story about me, it's a story about you. Is chemo painful? What's going to happen to your graduation? To your boyfriend, to your parents, to you, to your dreams? Why? How? When? Who? Now you begin to think. Yes, you can reflect if you're not touched, but it's reflection in abstraction. It's out there somewhere in ether. When you're touched, the story is very, very different. There's a reason why we don't like some people throughout our history. We don't like Malcolm, we don't like Martin, we don't like Jesus, we don't like Socrates. Why? They cause us pain. They don't just say, let me come to class and think some thoughts and go home. It doesn't work that way. You go home with the ideas and they're painful. Anyone else before we go home? What time is it? No, this is wrong.
Yes, it's 4 reasons.
10 to 11.
10 to 11. Oh, we're past. Listen, it's good to see all of you. Come to class with questions on Wednesday. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.